All right, welcome. This is the 27th call for the Wharf project. I am currently flying solo on this call. We may have some people jumping in later, but figured we would at least take this opportunity to provide some updates as to what's happened over the last week, um, and where we are heading now, and maybe a little bit on the struggles that we are facing with a couple of the things. Um, as quick updates, the website was updated again yesterday. We published the session kit side of the documentation. There's still some editing going on it, but there have been a lot of direct communications going on in which I was just linking people to the development version of the documentation because they needed it. So because of that, we decided we were going to push the documentation itself out in just rough shape. This is kind of a wiki anyways, with the ability to be able to edit pages on GitHub. So now we can just link people to the actual production build of the website that has these new sections of documentation. There's actually 18 or so new pages that have come out. Not all of them are rendered on the sidebar, but they are linked from other things and they are all searchable. So, like for example, login is the only login class that shows in the sidebar just natively. But when you search for login, you can see now all of a sudden it shows the login context, the login result, and things like that. So we're working on making this kind of an intelligent layout where you can get to the primary information very easily. And then when you're on that stuff, like you can see this links to the login result. But if you are also looking for that stuff, it will be searchable. So the documentation, we're hoping goes through all of the major components on how you use these various parts of it. But if there is feedback, there is something you've noticed we haven't explained properly, let us know. Like either on GitHub, again, you can kind of go to edit this page, open issues, or jump in Telegram and just let us know on that side. So there's a bunch of other things on the website, minor things that have changed. Like when you're coming through now, the bottom of the article lets you jump between like whatever's next. Um, There've been a lot of improvements to the navigation itself that I don't have to get into. We added the light mode, dark mode up here as well as in the footer now. Yeah, just lots of little things like that. So, but there should be a lot of good information, and I think that's the major takeaway from what has happened on the website over the past week or so. There are a couple more sections that still need to be finished off for the session kit. Specifically, like the transact page needs a little bit more documentation on it. Still working on that a little bit. All of the context pages aren't completed yet, but those are only relevant to plugin developers. Like if you are building a login plugin or a transact plugin, that's where you will have a context to interact with. If you're just building your own application, it's like a 99% chance you won't ever work with a context. You'll only be like calling the methods themselves and then using plugins. So it's this variation in audiences that we're working to try to make sense of. We have the developers who are just using this, and then we have the developers that are extending Wharf. So need to make sure that we're accommodating for both of those audiences because really one of the big powerful parts of Wharf is that you can just build on top of it, extend its functionality, and make it do what you really need it to do. So excited to see what people do with that and excited to give people opportunities to show off and share the additional things that they've built with this. Like maybe you've built a really cool analytics plugin for your website that integrates this somehow. And I don't know, just random example and maybe not even a great one. Aside from the website, which has been an ongoing adventure for many months now, we are pretty deep into the scatter plugin at this point. We have it semi-functional, but there have been a lot of challenges with bundling it. The actual bundling of all of the dependencies that Scatter has, they're all the old dependencies that are not Wharf. The only way to get around that would be to completely rewrite the whole thing. And that is just outside of the scope of our work. So Struggle, like I was saying, was the bundling. It's getting all those like EOS.js and some of the old crypto libraries that are being used, as well as some node modules that are included somewhere in the dependency tree, playing nicely with Wharf, so that way people can actually use the plugin. We have been using test accounts to sign transactions using Wombat, using the scatter protocol. So it's functional in some regards. The distribution itself has just been the kind of the major stumbling block. So hopefully we'll get through that soon. It's some really into the weeds stuff that is largely unanticipated that's been causing so many headaches there. But we know that there are people still using wallets that support that protocol that are going to want to be able to use these applications. So we'll keep pushing on it. We may reach out to the community for ideas if we just absolutely hit a brick wall. But right now we're trying to work through that internally. So, and other topics, there's a new discussion up. It is not directly Wharf related, but it will have trickling impacts on Wharf. It is a discussion on compression of packed transactions, which is very in the weeds in terms of technicality. We've put a poll up on this one, and the gist of it is that should we make all of the SDKs pack transaction or compress transactions by default? This is a feature that's been part of the Antelope stack for years and years and years. It's just none of the SDKs ever really took advantage of it. So we've all been just submitting transactions that are not compressed, which means they're bigger than they need to be. And this is an opportunity to flip the switch and start compressing that. This thread in the discussions kind of outlines all of the details about what that'll entail. I asked some questions yesterday in the Antelope developers chat about things I didn't know about, like would compression increase the CPU usage of each transaction? Answer turns out to be no, which is awesome. Makes the case for turning this on even stronger. But before we make this and we flip this switch, we're trying to get people who know and this very technical level of transactions to provide some feedback and to participate in the poll. So far, it looks like 5 people have voted, and everybody says yes. So we're internally, we think this is a really good idea, but we want somebody to tell us why it's a bad idea. And this is kind of one of those methods that we're trying to do that. So, and as always, feel free to jump into these discussions. They do get rather technical. They do get kind of theoretical at times, but if you're a developer engaging with the Wharf as a whole, like feel free to come here, ask questions, join in the discussion and the debate on some of these. That way, these are things that aren't going to be lost to the void of Telegram, where none of us know what was said last week. So. Other projects that are coming along, the contract kit, we are moving towards having a technical preview here in the not too distant future. The last, I don't know how many calls, we've been talking about the contract kit, how we create actions, how we create tables, and how it makes your developer experience just better through auto-completion, suggestions, and the awareness of the data that you're working with. These are all things that we're hoping to have relatively soon. I have internally seen a lot of motion on this, and hopefully the code generation part will be done in the next day or two, and then we'll be able to start wrapping a preview around that and publish that in the not too distant future. And then as the community is kind of consuming this technical preview and playing with it themselves and hopefully providing feedback about what could be better or might need just slight tweaks. We'll be moving on to the account kit, which will leverage the contract kit. That'll be a method for us to dog food the contract kit into a separate implementation that turns into this other distributable package that helps the management of accounts. Specifically, it allows apps to help users manage their own accounts or the apps to manage it for them. So it just abstracts away some of the complexities that currently exist if you're doing anything with the system contracts. Aside from that, there was a new release of the web renderer yesterday. It is the start. It was the 1.0.1. And it was a very simple change, nothing breaking reverse compatibility wise. And it is an option in the web renderer where you can pass minimal as a flag to the web renderer, and it will reduce the amount of UI elements that the web renderer will create during interactions with the session kit. So it does one thing right now, and that is that it will suppress error messages. So that way application developers can handle errors on their own. Currently, if you submit a transaction for like 1 billion tokens and you don't obviously have 1 billion tokens, Wharf would pop up with its web renderer and say, hey, here's the error message, you don't have enough tokens. The minimal flag disables that error prompting. So that way in your application, you can interpret the error and display the error however you want to your users. As a developer, you're probably going to know what the errors mean more than some generic user interface. So this will give you an opportunity to interpret the errors that you wrote in your smart contract and present something that makes sense to the end user. If there are other user interfaces that we can trim out in this quote unquote minimal configuration, we're open to what those may be. And just feel free to open an issue or ping us or some other way, and we can look at potentially reducing that as well. So this, just to play it safe and to move forward with this new idea of minimal, we're just going to do kind of one thing at a time and evaluate them as people bring them up. So that, again, out as 1.0.1. It's available now on NPM and should just be a drop-in replacement. If you don't need this, feel free not to upgrade. There's nothing else in this version except this one thing. So as far as other things going on, those are the big ones. There's a couple outstanding pull requests in the Antelope library itself. I guess this is the pull request for that pack transaction pull I mentioned when we were looking at the discussion earlier. We're making some changes to the APIs for get accounts by authorizers. So right now it doesn't support account lookups. It only supports key lookups. And we want to change the syntax to match that. It'll remain reverse compatible, but and then we are working on potentially changing the action class in the Antelope library to have embedded APIs. So that way actions, when you have them, could decode themselves instead of requiring you to pass in an API. We're still kind of looking at this. It is ready for review, but there could be some edge cases where the approach that was taken doesn't work. So we're slowly moving towards potentially implementing this feature. And until then, it's just going to hang out as a pull request that's open. All of these are probably moving towards 1.0 release of the Antelope library. Right now we're on 0.7.3 or 4.3. Oh yeah, I could just look. There might be a 0.8 that comes out with this with the account authorizers change, but the only reason we're going to bump up the minor version is because this might be, there may be some backwards compatibility breaks in it. And we're trying to be cautious since there's a decent amount of people actually using this library at this point, including the session kit and contract kit. So it's kind of the heart of Wharf itself. Yeah, I mean, in terms of updates, that is largely where we are at. There's a few plugins in the back that are being developed still, but they're very low priority, kind of when we have time sort of situations as we push forward. And I think our priorities right now are, we need this contract kit MVP, which very soon is what we're expecting. We're going to use that to make the account kit, and we'll start talking about the account kit. The Antelope stuff that we've talked about, that is, I don't think we need any more development. We're kind of just moving through feedback on that. and then more documentation. That is what consumes a lot of our time right now. We have the end goal for the session kit documentation in sight, and we then will be starting on the contract kit documentation. Um, and then I think beyond that, big project wise, we have some, I don't know what to call them quite yet. They're contract kit implementations for other projects that are in the milestones for this. An example of one would be Atomic Assets, the contract. We are going to be using the contract kit to kind of, again, dog fooding the contract kit to build an Atomic Assets package. And it will wrap all of the types. It'll do all of the ABI optimizations and embed that in your application for auto completion and stuff like that. It'll have an API wrapper that allows the integration with the third-party API, the Atomic Assets API that you can run, and that many people do run. And it'll kind of extend all of that into a nice package that uses Wharf, all of the aspects of Wharf, to allow you to more easily work with something like Atomic Assets in your application. There's a couple other ones of these that we'll be doing. There's some like history ones that we're looking at doing. We might be doing one for like the Oracle contracts that are out there. That seems like another good candidate. And then hopefully we'll get other people building these for other contracts as well. This is very much meant to be if you are a developer of a open contract, like it's not exclusive to your application and you want other applications to use it, it probably would make a lot of sense to use the contract kit to create a distribution, a package of some kind for your contract that you can just distribute, and then when you want people to interact in a front end with your application, you can say, hey, I published this package on NPM. It is kind of a companion to my smart contract. And when you're interacting with my smart contract, just install this package and you'll get all of this like baked in functionality for whatever that contract may be. So that's kind of one of the next phases after we get out of both the contract and account kit. And then beyond that, there's a couple other things, but they're all a little bit more future. The project itself is supposed to be wrapping up towards September. On the coalition call, I had mentioned to them that the documentation might bleed out after September. Like it may trail out into, I don't know, October, hopefully not too much further than that, just because we need these things to be done before we can actually finalize the documentation for them. So, and I guess to add a couple other things, there's going to be on the fireside today for EOS, we'll be talking a little bit about Wharf, just more of a teaser, because tomorrow there is a Twitter Spaces event that the ENF is putting on. It'll be me and Brandon Lovejoy. We'll be talking about the session kit and the session kit launch and how that has all gone and kind of a high level overview of whatever that is. And that will then lead into probably a webinar in the following weeks. I think we're nailing all of that down right now. So the public front of the Wharf project is starting to come more online as we start reaching out further and further than, just this call and just Telegram, for example. So we're really trying to get this out in front of developers, get them starting to use it, making sure it works for them, and then obviously collecting feedback all along the way. So lots coming up. In the next couple months, this is all really going to be a cohesive package that developers are just going to be able to chew on and build around. And hopefully it just really improves the developer experience for everybody that is entering the space or has been in the space for, ages working in their projects. So yeah, I think that's kind of the end of what seems to be a monologue today. I think there was another meeting that ran over for some of the other participants today, and that's why there is none of our regular guests in the audio portion of this chat. So I think we will probably just wrap it up here for today and wait and do this again next week. Feel free to join into the Twitter Spaces tomorrow if you want to jump into that conversation. I think on our Twitter, we have retweeted that. So it should be pretty easy to find. I think it's the latest tweet on the Gray Mass account. Yeah, and that'll about do it. So thanks for joining in today, and thanks for listening along if you're listening to this in the future.